Why do you keep doing the thing you already know is hurting you? Not once, not by accident, again and again. The cigarette you light without deciding to, the phone you reach for before your eyes are even fully open, the extra glass you pour after telling yourself an hour ago that tonight would be different. Somewhere in you, a part keeps choosing the exact thing that costs you the most. That's not chaos, that's communication. And here's the question almost nobody thinks to ask. What if that part of you isn't broken? What if it's talking? Carl Jung spent his life listening to what the mind hides from itself. And when he looked closely at addiction, he didn't see weakness. He saw a message sent by something inside you that has run out of quieter ways to be heard. By the end of this video, you may understand for the first time why you never truly won against the thing you kept fighting. Because you were never actually supposed to fight it. You were supposed to translate it. Here's the part that doesn't add up. Willpower works. For a while. You quit, you resist, you white-knuckle your way through a genuinely hard week. Maybe even a hard month. And then, on some completely ordinary Tuesday, for no reason you can point to, you're right back where you started. If addiction were purely a matter of discipline, that relapse should be rare. It isn't. Disciplined people fall into the exact same loop as everyone else. Surgeons, elite athletes, people who have survived things far harder than a craving. Willpower was never the missing ingredient. So what if the problem was never a shortage of willpower? What if this whole time you've been aiming your strength at the wrong target? You already know this moment. The house goes quiet. Everyone's asleep, or you're simply alone, and your hand is already moving toward the phone on the nightstand, the fridge door, the bottle on the counter, before you've consciously decided anything at all. You didn't plan it. It happened the way your body flinches before your mind even registers the danger. For a few minutes, everything gets softer, lighter, quieter, and then it's over, and the weight comes back, usually heavier than it was before, with a little shame stacked on top of it. That's happened to you. Maybe not with the same substance, the same habit, but you know exactly what this feels like from the inside. Maybe it isn't the phone or the bottle at all. Maybe it's the fourth cup of coffee you didn't need, just to feel something other than flat. Maybe it's checking an ex's social media at 1 a.m., telling yourself it's curiosity, knowing full well it's something closer to grief. Maybe it's the way you say yes to one more obligation, one more favor, because being needed feels safer than being alone with your own thoughts for even 10 minutes. Addiction doesn't only wear the obvious costumes. Sometimes it wears busyness. Sometimes it wears perfectionism. Sometimes it wears the shape of a relationship you keep returning to, even though some part of you already knows how the story ends. Here's the first shift. Small, but it changes everything that follows. Addiction almost never arrives shouting. It arrives disguised as relief, as comfort, as a small kindness you're offering yourself at the end of a hard day. And underneath nearly every one of those impulses, there is an origin point, a pain that was never fully felt the first time, which is exactly why it never fully left. That pain isn't asking to be avoided anymore. It's asking, in the only way it knows how, to be heard. Which brings us to the real question of this video. Not how do I stop? Something stranger. Something almost nobody thinks to ask. What exactly is my addiction trying to tell me? Jung actually had a name for whatever is doing that talking. He called it the shadow. And once you understand what he meant by it, you'll never look at a craving the same way again. In 1913, Carl Jung's professional world collapsed. He had just broken from Sigmund Freud, his mentor, the man who once called Jung his own successor. The split was public, bitter, total. Almost overnight, he lost his professional community, close friendships, and the identity he'd built his adult life around. For the years that followed, Jung entered what he privately called his confrontation with the unconscious. Strange, intrusive visions, sometimes in broad daylight. Dreams so intense they frightened him. Notebook after notebook trying to capture what was rising in him. Images that would later become the Red Book. Colleagues quietly worried he was losing his mind. In private, so did he. He later admitted there were nights he genuinely feared he wouldn't find his way back. Here is the part almost nobody expects. Jung did not medicate the visions away, distract himself, or shame himself for having them. He sat with the chaos. He let the images speak, however disturbing, and tried patiently to translate them rather than silence them. Years later, he wrote that what he learned in those years became the foundation for everything else he'd discover about the human psyche. The parts of ourselves we exile, the grief, the rage, the shame we won't look at directly, don't vanish because we refuse them. They wait. And when they can no longer reach us through calm reflection, they find another way in. Often, that way in is compulsion. This is where Jung's understanding of addiction actually begins, not in a clinic, but in his own darkest years, sitting with the very material most people spend a lifetime running from. What's easy to miss is how ordinary his method actually was, underneath the strangeness of the visions. He needed a notebook, an hour of silence, and the willingness to treat his own mind as something to understand rather than manage. Decades later, he told one of his most famous patients, a man deep in alcoholism, that the only cure powerful enough to compete with the craving was a genuine shift in the depths of the personality, close to what recovery circles still call a spiritual awakening. Not more discipline, a different relationship with the self entirely. Before we go further, sit with one question. Imagine someone could remove your compulsion completely, tomorrow, with no effort from you at all, the craving simply gone. Who would you be the moment you finally had to feel everything it had been quietly covering for you? That question is uncomfortable on purpose. Hold on to it, because everything that follows is really just an attempt to answer it. Jung did not see addiction as a moral failure. He saw it as a symptom, the visible tip of something submerged far below the surface. Think about it this way. If you were genuinely at peace, whole, with no unspoken grief, no unmet need, no wound still quietly bleeding underneath your daily life, what exactly would there be left to numb? Whatever you reach for, the drink, the phone, the food, the cigarette, is only the surface. What matters is what you're silencing underneath it. He called that hidden material the shadow. Everything about yourself that you've judged, rejected, buried, or never once allowed anyone, including yourself, to see clearly. Picture it as a locked room in a house you've lived in for years. A room you painted over, nailed shut, and stopped mentioning to guests. Old grief you never finished crying. A childhood that quietly taught you that love had to be earned through performance. Exhaustion you're not permitted to admit out loud because too many people depend on you being fine. The shadow does not stay quiet forever, and when it cannot reach you through conscious thought, it starts speaking through compulsion instead. A glass poured at 11 at night. A scroll that swallows 2 hours you don't remember living. This isn't random noise. It's a signal. Badly translated, distorted by the static of avoidance, but a signal nonetheless. Jung repeatedly argued that what is pushed out of consciousness tends to return indirectly, in symptoms, in compulsions, in the exact behavior we swore we'd never repeat. The very act of fighting an impulse without first understanding it tends to feed that impulse. Not because you are weak, but because resistance without understanding is just another, more exhausting way of refusing to listen. The riverbed doesn't choose the water, but it decides where every river flows. Your unexamined wounds work the same way. You don't choose the craving directly, but the wound decides where it runs, night after night, almost on schedule. Your addiction has excellent aim. It always finds the wound. And this is why so many people describe their addiction as ritualistic: a time, a place, a smell, a particular kind of silence, almost a private liturgy where the goal was never pleasure, but forgetting. Like a small theater that only performs late at night. The ache walks on first, then the ritual right on cue. And you sit in the audience half convinced you're just watching, when really, you wrote tonight's script yourself. See the pattern as a performance instead of a personal failure, and something loosens. The question stops being, why do I keep doing this to myself? And becomes, what role is this ritual actually playing? And for whom? Try something the next time the pull arrives. Toward the phone, the fridge, the bottle, whatever it happens to be for you. Before you act on it, pause for exactly 10 seconds. In those 10 seconds, ask one question and mean it. What am I actually trying not to feel right now? Not, why am I so weak? Not, what's wrong with me? Just, what's underneath this? Right now. Tonight. Most people never ask that question, because the entire design of the ritual is built to skip past it. That's the actual function of the compulsion, to rush you toward relief before the feeling underneath ever has the chance to surface and be named. 10 seconds won't stop the urge. It isn't supposed to, but it interrupts the autopilot, even briefly. And in that small gap, something Jung considered essential begins to happen. Awareness, arriving exactly where automatic behavior used to live. Do this enough nights in a row, and a strange thing happens. The question itself starts to feel less like an obstacle and more like a companion. You stop dreading the urge quite as much because it no longer arrives alone. It arrives with a question already attached to it, one that makes the moment feel less like a trap and more like an opening. A man named Diego tried this with his late-night snacking. The first few nights, the question just sat there awkwardly. What am I not feeling? Felt like a strange thing to ask over a bag of chips. On the fourth night, the answer surprised him. He wasn't hungry. He was bored in a marriage that had gone quiet years ago, and food was the only excitement left on the schedule. He didn't fix his marriage that week, but he stopped pretending the chips were about hunger. That small shift in awareness is only half the story, though. There's a harder layer underneath it. Here's where this gets harder to sit with. If addiction really is a message, then the culture's most common response to it, treat it as a defect, punish it, shame it into silence, is almost exactly backwards. It's the equivalent of ripping the wires out of a smoke alarm because the sound is unbearable, without ever checking whether the house is actually on fire. But there's a detail that changes everything about this argument. To be fair, this idea has real critics, and they deserve a hearing, not dismissal. Modern addiction medicine largely treats addiction as a disease, neurochemistry, dopamine pathways rewired by repeated use, often with little connection to any deeper wound. Clinicians rightly warn that framing every addiction as a symbolic message can be dangerous. It risks romanticizing a life-threatening condition, or excusing continued use while waiting for insight that may never come. Some people need medical intervention first, meaning-making second, if at all. That criticism matters. Symbolic understanding is not a substitute for medical care when someone's life is genuinely at risk. That person should be reaching for professional help, not metaphors. But the deeper conversation still matters alongside it. Biology explains the mechanism of a craving without explaining its meaning. Two people can carry near identical dependencies, with radically different wounds driving them there. Treating only the body, without asking what the compulsion was guarding against, explains a pattern specialists see constantly. People who get sober, technically, and still feel just as hollow. Jung's shadow isn't a replacement for treatment. It's the part treatment alone often leaves out. Two doctors, same fever. One treats the infection. The other asks why the immune system gave out first. Both right. Neither complete alone. Here's what that actually looks like in an ordinary life. A woman named Rachel spent 4 years white-knuckling her way through sobriety, counting days, tracking every relapse like a personal failure on a spreadsheet. Then, one night after a relapse she was sure would be her last straw, her therapist asked her a different question. Not what triggered you, but what were you 14 the last time you felt that exact feeling? She sat with it, and what came up wasn't about the drink at all. It was about a father who left, and a silence in that house that no one ever explained to a 9-year-old girl. That relapse became the first time in 4 years she cried about her father instead of drinking about him. She still isn't finished, but something shifted the night she finally answered the right question. And here is the moment that reorganizes everything you've heard so far. This is where almost everyone interprets Jung the wrong way. If there's one sentence to carry out of this video, it's this: what you won't say out loud, your body will act out instead. You've probably spent years treating your addiction as an enemy, something to defeat, something to be quietly ashamed of, something to hide from the people who know you best. But what if it was never against you? What if, from the very beginning, it was for you? What if every 2 a.m. impulse, every compulsive scroll, every drink you didn't technically need was your own psyche, using the only language it had left, saying something close to, "Look at me. I still exist. I still need to be heard." That single reframe changes the entire war. You were never fighting a flaw in your character. You were ignoring a message from the most wounded, most neglected part of yourself, and mistaking its plea for an attack. No enemy, just an unanswered call. Say it plainly, because it's worth remembering. Your addiction may be destroying your life today, but it probably began by trying to protect a wound. Jung called the path toward healing that wound individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole, not by deleting the parts of you that hurt, but by finally letting them back into the room you've kept them locked out of for years. The shadow was never the villain of your story. There's a real chance it's the only part of you that never once stopped trying to save you. It just never learned a gentler way to get your attention. Understanding the message is one thing. Living it out tonight is another. So what do you actually do with this? Tonight, the next time the pull comes. Not suppress it, not shame yourself for feeling it. Something closer to an honest conversation. If the urge to smoke rises, try saying it plainly, even just in your head. I see you. I hear what you're carrying. Today, I'm going to answer you differently. If it's the phone calling you before sleep, put it down and write one sentence instead, by hand if you can. What did I lose today that I haven't let myself grieve yet? If it's stress pulling you toward the fridge or the bottle, try lying flat on the floor, closing your eyes, and breathing slowly for 2 full minutes before you decide anything at all. None of this is about heroic willpower, gritting your teeth harder than last time. It's about swapping one ritual for another, trading the unconscious version for a conscious one. You're not trying to erase the impulse. You're finally translating it, the way Jung translated his own visions instead of running from them. Not less desire, more translation. And if what you're carrying is a severe dependency, the kind that puts your health or your safety at risk, this practice is meant to sit alongside professional support, not replace it. Understanding the message doesn't cancel the need for real treatment. It simply makes that treatment mean something, instead of just being something you endure. Do this enough times and something genuinely shifts. Not because the desire vanishes completely, it may not for a long while, but because you slowly stop being its prisoner and start being the one who decides, consciously, what happens next. And if the pull returns tomorrow, and it likely will, that isn't proof that any of this failed. Jung never described individuation as a straight line. It's closer to a spiral. You circle back to the same ache more than once, but each time you meet it carrying a little more awareness than the last time around. The goal was never a single perfect night of restraint. The goal is a slowly widening gap between the urge and the automatic reaction to it. A gap where, more and more often, you get to choose. You stayed until the end of this. That on its own already tells you something about you. Remember the question we started with? What if that part of you wasn't broken? What if it was talking? Now you know. It was never broken. It was trying to speak. Jung never believed in shortcuts. He believed real healing required going down, not around it. And tonight, in whatever quiet way you did this, alone, in the dark, maybe with your own version of this pull sitting somewhere nearby, you just did exactly that. Maybe the question you carry out of this video isn't, how do I stop? Maybe it's the one Jung would have asked instead, the one this entire video has been circling from the very first line. What part of me still needs to be heard? That question, asked honestly at 2 a.m. in the silence right before the old ritual usually begins, might do more for you than any rule of abstinence ever could. Healing rarely looks dramatic. Sometimes it isn't the day you stop drinking. It's the day you finally cry about what made you drink. Not a finish line. A locked room finally opened, with the light let back in. The next time the pull comes, don't run from it. And don't fight it either. Just listen. It might be the most honest conversation you've had with yourself in years. Because in the end, the opposite of addiction is not discipline. It is understanding. And here's the twist you probably didn't see coming. The voice you've spent years trying to silence was never asking you to quit anything. It was asking you to come back.